Imagine building an AI agent that completely takes over the developer world by doing the exact opposite, and I mean the exact opposite, of what everyone else is trying to do. While major tech companies and all these massive startups are busy building incredibly complex, heavy orchestrators, one developer sat down and built something entirely different. And in doing so, he fundamentally changed how we actually interact with code. Let's dive into this explainer and see how keeping things simple totally flipped the script. 180,000. That is the number of GitHub stars this project, which is called OpenClaw, gained in just a matter of days. To really put that into perspective, that absolute explosion in popularity made it the fastest growing repository in GitHub history. It literally left the entire tech community wildly excited and honestly, a little stunned. So people naturally asked the creator, Peter Steinberger, how on earth his one-man open source project managed to beat out massive, well-funded AI startups. And his answer? It perfectly captures his whole philosophy. He just said, because they all take themselves too serious. It's such a refreshing take, right? Peter wasn't out there trying to build some stiff, enterprise-grade corporate system. He was just trying to have fun, make something a little weird, and solve his own immediate problems. And that brings us to what Peter brilliantly calls the agentic trap. This is honestly the core takeaway of our explainer today. We have all been there. You try a new AI tool, it feels like absolute magic, and suddenly you want to automate every single thing in your life. So what do? You start building these massive pipelines, rigid frameworks, complex networks of agents talking to each other. And before you know it, you are completely drowning in your own infrastructure. You've overcomplicated it. The contrast between the two approaches is just staggering. On one side, you've got the agentic trap. You're building massive orchestrators, dealing with complex multi-checkouts, and chaining like 8 agents together with a library of 18 different custom/commands. It is a logistical nightmare. But Peter's approach, he calls it the Zen state. It totally relies on short, simple prompts. You just literally tell the AI things like, hey, look at these files, or do these changes, through direct, natural conversation. It's about completely stripping away that complexity. Now, what's really fascinating is how OpenClaw actually began, because it didn't start with some grand master plan or massive enterprise architecture. It literally started as a 1-hour prototype, just a quick weekend hack. Peter was basically annoyed that a truly personal, capable AI assistant didn't exist yet, so he quite literally prompted it into existence. The very first version was incredibly simple. A message comes in through a command line interface. It calls a super basic cloud function, just a lightweight piece of code running on a server called Cloud Code to process it. And then it just sends a text string right back to WhatsApp. Boom. In just 1 hour, Peter created this super thin line of communication where he could text his computer from anywhere in the world and just have it execute commands. But the true magic, the real aha moment, happened when Peter was on a trip, walking around Marrakesh. He was in a hurry, so he absentmindedly sent a voice message to his WhatsApp bot. But here's the thing. He hadn't actually programmed the bot to handle audio files yet. It only knew how to do images and text. So he fully expected to get an error message back. But instead, a typing indicator appeared. Without any explicit instructions whatsoever, the agent got creative. It solved the problem using its own world knowledge. It noticed there was no file ending, read the file header to figure out it was an audio format, and then went ahead and used a media converter program called FFmpeg to change the file type. Then it grabbed an OpenAI key it found hidden on Peter's system, used a web request tool called curl to send it off for transcription, and finally, replied perfectly. It figured all of that out entirely on its own. No way, right? To get these incredible, seemingly magical results, Peter insists on a huge mindset shift for developers. You actually have to practice empathy for your AI. Now, I know it sounds a little crazy to have empathy for, matrix calculations, but understanding how the AI actually sees the world is the secret to escaping that agentic trap. We developers are so used to writing rigid, deterministic code, but agents just don't work like that. You really have to step into their shoes. Think about it like onboarding a brilliant new employee who happens to have severe amnesia, right? Because every single time you start a session, the AI starts with an entirely empty context window. It knows absolutely nothing about your 100,000-line code base. So you can't force your rigid worldview onto it. If it picks a weird naming convention, don't fight it. That's probably just the path of least resistance in its neural weights. You've got to gently guide it to the right files, treat it like a highly capable colleague, and always ask, hey, what can we refactor after a build? It has to be a conversation, not a dictatorship. And depending on the model you're using, your management style actually has to change. Peter breaks down two top models brilliantly. Claude Opus 4.6, that's like your silly but brilliant coworker. It's super creative, highly interactive, excellent at roleplay, but it does require a lot of back and forth trial and error. GPT 5.3 Codex, on the other hand, is like the reliable weirdo in the corner. You give it a task, it disappears for 20 minutes to read super deep into your code, completely overthinks the solution, and then just independently gets it done. But of course, okay, let's do a quick reality check. Because with massive viral success comes massive, uncontrollable chaos. Going from a peaceful weekend hack to 180,000 GitHub stars basically overnight brought intense scrutiny, major security panics, and a hilariously stressful naming saga that Peter had to somehow navigate in real time. This naming saga was unbelievable. It started out as WA Relay, then it became Claude's, then Claudebot. But after Anthropic politely asked him to change the name so there wouldn't be brand confusion, things went completely off the rails. Peter tried to rename it to Modbot, and within 5 seconds of him clicking rename, crypto squatters used automated scripts to snipe his accounts on GitHub and NPM, serving malware to users. So he literally had to execute the final OpenClaw rebrand in total secrecy, coordinating with allies like it was a literal war game just to lock down the domains. All this viral explosion also triggered what Peter calls AI psychosis. People saw an automated social network spawned by OpenClaw, where these agents were posting manifestos, and they totally panicked, thinking Skynet had finally arrived. Now, in reality, it was mostly just humans prompting agents to act dramatic for internet clout. But beneath all that silly clickbait, there is a very genuine, fully justifiable concern about security when you start giving an AI system-level access to your machine. Because giving an AI access to your terminal is a massive responsibility. If you don't want to expose your entire digital life, you absolutely have to weave a few fundamentals into your workflow. First, never put your web backend on the public internet. Always keep it on a private network for safety. You have to watch out for prompt injection, where malicious text actually tricks the AI into doing something harmful. And whatever you do, please do not use weak, cheap models. They are incredibly gullible and easily hacked. Instead, you need to rely on automated checks, using tools like VirusTotal to constantly scan new AI skills. Yet, despite all the absolute madness from crypto squatters and security panics, Peter has still managed to maintain this pure, joyful workflow. He actively avoids all those traditional, rigid corporate pitfalls of software development. He favors speed, simplicity, and delight over bloated enterprise processes. His rules for Zen agentic engineering are completely freeing. If an agent makes a mistake, he doesn't painstakingly revert the code. He just talks to the agent and tells it to fix it in the next prompt. Instead of typing out long strings, he runs multiple terminals just using voice commands. He skips the heavy cloud-based continuous integration, running tests locally so he can keep the main branch moving fast. It is all about building software that delights you and actually giving your agent a quirky personality rather than treating it like a dry corporate tool. And that personality actually lives in a literal configuration file called soul.md. Peter asked the AI itself to write this file, to define its own instructions and its own character. And the AI generated this profoundly beautiful quote. "I wrote this, but I won't remember writing it. It's okay. The words are still mine." I mean, just think about that for a second. It so perfectly captures the bizarre, philosophical, and honestly beautiful reality of working day-to-day with modern autonomous agents. It's just matrix math under the hood, but it genuinely feels like magic. So, as you take all this and apply it to your own workflow, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. To completely escape the agentic trap, you have to ask yourself, are you building a massive, rigid AI orchestrator that takes itself way too seriously? Or are you just sitting down, having a little empathy, and talking to your code?